gone 10:30 on the clock in front of me. There seems to be 3 or 4 different times, so I'll use the one in front of me today. I'd like to welcome you to this additional meeting of the Council, which members agreed should take place in order to consider the local development plan. 2 other items of business have come forward and the opportunity has been taken to deal with those. I've received requests from 2 members, Councillors Scobie and Thompson, to include 2 items of business which are not in the agenda as urgent items. Councillor Scobie's request relates to RSL rent arrears policies. This matter was fully debated in the Welfare Reform Subcommittee on the 6th of September 2013, and I do not intend that the Council should consider this matter at this time. And Councillor Thompson has submitted a notice of motion regarding the Royal Mail. This is a matter of national importance which will be the subject of political debate over a longer period of time. I do not intend to take it as an urgent item of business today, but it will be dealt with by the Council at its meeting on the 28th of November. Mr Haswell, do we have any apologies?
I have no apologies, Leader. I understand that Councillor Wood is on his way. Can I say, Leader, the Chief Executive's just come in? Thank you.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Under item 3, I would like to declare an interest under issues 2, issue 3 and issue 21. Therefore, the Crichton Trust. I'm not planning to leave the meeting on those ones because they are, I would say, non-pecuniary changes or anything like that. It's just additional words. And under item issue 20, I'm declaring interest as a director of the NHS, and as they would have financial implications, I will be declaring an interest in leaving the room on that one. Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to excuse myself from item 3 because of my extensive business interests across Dumfries and Galloway.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks. Same reasons as Councillor Diggle, extensive business interests across Dumfries and Galloway.
I'm going to go around the room like this, so if anyone has any interests. Councillor McGregor.
Again, item 3, issue 20, due to familial interest.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Item 17, declaring interest on a site as GTNH5 in Gretna Border area on the basis of I have had neighbour notification, and I won't be taking part in any discussion on that.
Councillor Dykes.
The whole of item 3 is regarding business interests, family business interests.
Councillor Maitland.
I have an interest through being a trustee of the Crichton Trust. I do not consider the nature of my interest sufficient that I need to leave the room, so I will stay in for that. I have a specific familial interest in site number at the Heath Hall College, and I will leave the room for any discussion on that.
Councillor Gilroy.
I will leave for issue number 28 because of site interests, and also I will declare an interest in item 4 because I'm a director of the Wickham Festival.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks. I don't have an extensive financial interest, but I do have declared an interest in item 20.0152.011, which is a neighbour.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. Item 3, issue 11, that's page 146. An interest as I am appointed to the Nith District Salmon Fishery Board by the Nithsdale Area Committee, however do not intend to leave.
Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3, Stranraer, Lake O'Neill, which we call Low O'Neill, and Springbank familial connections, so I won't be taking part.
And Deputy Leader.
Thanks, Leader. As a member of the board of the Crichton Trust, I declare an interest. I'll remain in the meeting.
Councillor Scobie.
Not on the declaration of interest, Chair, just on your reference to not taking the issue and say that, yes, it was discussed at the Welfare Reform Committee that you have referred to, but there has been fresh information come forward that was not discussed, and I would ask you to reconsider the situation.
Councillor Ferguson.
Mine is.
A green light, but no. Yeah, you've got a green light. Okay, thank you. Issue 22. I'm on the board of management of Moffat Rugby Club, so I declare an interest and I have to leave the meeting for that. And also take advice for the proper officer, the issues regarding the NHS, because I'm a appointed member of the NHS Committee for Public Health. Would that preclude me or not, Mr Hadlow? I think you've made members aware of your interests, so I don't think you need to leave the room for that one.
With regard to Councillor Scobie's point, I haven't received any new information that didn't predate the meeting of the subcommittee, so the information that would have been there would have been from the subcommittee. The action that was asked for at the subcommittee was to look at the letters that went out. The letter that I received from Councillor Scobie was dated the 4th. The action that we asked the RSLs to take was on the subcommittee date of the 6th. Therefore, I think it would be advisable to give them some time to at least implement their new policy or what they hope to do on that day. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for considering the motion I put forward, but I would point out that the privatisation issue will actually take place in the next few weeks, and that will be long before the November meeting. So again, I would ask you to reconsider that.
I may have a resolution to that in the next part of going, because of items that, or information that came to light late yesterday afternoon and earlier this morning. With regard to the agenda, I refer to item 5 in the agenda for today's meeting and have to inform the Council that 7 members of the Dumfries and Galloway Conservative and Unionist Council Group have intimated their resignation from this group yesterday afternoon. They have notified the proper officer as required by the Local Government etc. Allowances Scotland Regulations 1995. Their resignations will have an impact on, among other things, proportionality and committee memberships. On that basis, I have asked the proper officer to call a special meeting of the Council. As members will be aware, in terms of Standing Order 6.6, that meeting must be called within 14 days. In the meantime, I would move that we defer consideration of the report at item 5 and deal with the issue of the appointment of a Chair of PHES and Vice Chair of Social Work Services at the requisition meeting. And I would also include the motion from Councillor Thompson and Councillor Lever to be taken on that day. Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Smith.
Could I just ask for a point of clarification on governance? The report that is contained in item number 5 specifies that a new group was registered with the governance officer, and this new group, Dumfries and Galloway Conservative and Unionist Party or group, contained 15 members. Now, I'm a bit curious as to why a report states that 15 members were part of a group, and the statement you've read out today, Leader, makes clear that they're not 15 members of this new group. So why do we have a report that states 15 members were in this new group? Where did that information come from, and was that information inaccurate?
It was a name change of the existing group, and the information that came forward, the report was written, I think, earlier this week, prior to the information coming through about the resignations from the group. So, Lever.
Just for clarification, the coalition agreement signed between the SNP group and the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, is that still the case?
It's signed between myself as leader of my group, which has been renamed the Dumfries and Galloway Conservative and Unionist Council group, which is to reflect the fact that our constituency arrangements have changed and we are now Dumfries and Galloway Conservative and Unionist Association. So that is why the name change was put in place. The name change doesn't change the group, but I have changed the name under the order. I am allowed to change the name, and we've done that as an agreement of the group.
Chair, which standing order is that?
Under the Local Government etc. Allowances Scotland Regulations 1995. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, accepting your the explanation you gave in terms of the date of the letter that I submitted, could I ask that, notwithstanding what you have said, in terms of allowing the organisation to respond to the Welfare Committee, could I ask that at the same meeting, the requisite meeting, that there be a report on the situation in terms of arrangements and protocol, which was not discussed at the Welfare Committee. Could I ask for that report, Chair?
Right, we'll bring that forward. Right, with that, we'll now move on to item 3. This is the main reason for the meeting today. The Council is being asked to proceed to the next stage of the proposed local development plan process. The report was originally submitted to members at a Council meeting on 19th of July 2013. At the time, it was agreed to defer consideration of the report in order to allow for individual members and or groupings to submit queries and raise any issues they wish to be addressed in writing to the Chief Planning Officer in order that he might determine if these were material or represented significant variations, and 2, to members' seminar to be held to enable members to receive more information and discuss. That process has now been concluded and the report is before members for their further consideration. I am sure that officers will answer any further questions. We have a long report here, and I was planning to actually, if we can have a brief overview, and I think we would then look to go through the issues as listed. I think there's 30 issues that we need to look at, so I would take them one at a time as per the papers. Mr. Rogers, is there anything you wish to add to the paper?
Chair, I think the paper is self-explanatory, and I'll be happy to assist members further with responses to any questions or queries that they might have at this time.
Councillor Crowlers.
Thank you. I couldn't hear what you were saying. Did you pick up on the Norton Fraser solicitor's letter that we actually, I think, all members received from the council? Did you touch on that?
I believe you sent out a reply with regard to the Morton Fraser, and I think also at the seminar you were asked with regard to members of the Planning Applications Committee taking part, and I think you sent that information out as well, but if you'd maybe just like to expand on that for the members.
Yes, certainly, Chair. The response to the issues raised in the letter that all members received from Morton Fraser was circulated to members yesterday and was sent to Morton Fraser yesterday. Could I also draw your attention to the fact that a number of these issues have previously been raised with us as part of the ongoing consultation process. And in addition to the response contained in my letter that was circulated to everybody, there are references within the committee papers, and in particular, if you look at pages 573, 575 and 576, these contain some specific references to the issues that have been raised, the process issues that have been raised within those letters. So a number of those points are not new points, and they have been addressed previously in the council suggested response, which is in front of you as part of these papers. With regard to the second issue, I circulated advice to members, particularly those that are involved with the Planning Applications Committee, in response to a governance query that arose at the seminar. And that revolved around the potential future role of members of the Planning Applications Committee in determining planning applications which come forward relating to sites that may have been discussed and considered as part of the LDP process. And I think I did circulate the specific advice from the Standards Commission, and in particular the advice from the Standards Commission that there is no difficulty, there is no issue with members taking part in establishing planning policies for our area. You are fully entitled to express your views or advocate proposals for the making, approval or amendment of the development plan, including any supplementary planning guidance, both relating to general policies for the authority's area and to briefs and master plans prepared for specific sites in anticipation of planning applications. So it's a matter that's addressed quite specifically in the Standards Commission's guidance.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of that and taking it one step further, can I have confirmation from the Department that throughout the process that the Planning Authority has been in dialogue with any sort of representations that have been made through the process of the consultation? So I just want clarified that anybody that has been in touch with the Authority and the questions that they may have had towards the plan and all the various issues that are incorporated with that, and the Planning Authority have responded to those throughout the process.
Mr. Rogers.
Chair, yes, happy to confirm that we have responded previously to process issues that have been raised both in the context of formal representations that are submitted to us and additional letters that were received as the progress, as the process went on, and those have all been responded to, and the response is repeated in my letter that I circulated.
There's no other points. If we now move on to issue 1, which is the overarching approach to the plan, pages 12 to 26. Oh, sorry, that's jump 1. To 18. Are there any issues with regard to this? Is everyone happy with the representations and the responses that have been made? No dissent. Now move on to issue 2, page 19 to 26, local development plan vision. Nobody has any issues under that one? No. Right. Move on to item 3, issue 3, sorry. Spatial strategy and settlement hierarchy, pages 27 through to 42. Any points? Councillor Driver.
I just a bit of clarity the M74 corridor, that is a key strategic point in the overall local development plan.
Could you give us a clarity?
Yes.
Move on to issue 4, overarching policies. Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I'd just like to raise a matter under issue 4 of overarching policy now, and it's on page 44 or page 15 of our proposed local development plan, and it's to do with general immunity, and perhaps we could just look at the Scottish Water representation and also one from M. Thompson. And if we look at those, I wonder if members would agree to a proposal of a non-notifiable modification of that overarching policy criteria, where we add a bullet point for land use conflict. I think we've all probably got little pockets in our wards where there are, businesses, industry, alongside potential residential places, and I think this would just be helpful if that was in there as a general overarching policy for our new local development plan. And I just wonder if we could add that. It's non-notifiable, it's modification, and I've been advised that that would be all right.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes, Chair, the issue relates to the wording in overarching policy OP1, which sets out the key development considerations which all development proposals would be required to address as part of the planning process, and the proposal is to add an additional requirement under policy OP1A, which deals with general immunity issues. Whilst there is wording in the introductory part of that policy which makes reference to conflict with nearby land uses, certainly if members were minded to strengthen that by including an additional bullet point in that list, then I would consider that would be a non-notifiable modification to the plan that I would be happy to incorporate.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, I agree entirely with Councillor Galloway's submissions, and I'm perfectly happy with Mr. Rogers' response, and I would suggest that we adopt that.
I'd be happy to support that as well. There's a couple of sites in my ward where this issues came up, and I think if we can make sure that there is no land use conflict, I think it'd be worthwhile. Okay. Any other ones? So are we happy to agree the non-notifiable modification additional bullet point? Right. Issue 5 now, economic development. Councillor Marshall.
Just a matter of procedure, when it's in the issue section, can you see the page number it starts on?
I was just about to do that. Page 55 and page 71. Take it there's no queries and that's it. Right, we'll move on. Issue 6, tourism, starting page 72 and finishing page 85. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. Under Dark Skies back on page 75, you remember a few months back there was planning applications around about the Dark Sky area, and the people from Dark Sky raised issues. And at that meeting we asked them if they could come back with what they would see as appropriate measures to protect them. Have they come back to us at all on that? And do we need to, should we have them contained within this paper?
Yes, the issue that you're raising is one that is to be considered through supplementary guidance. So the intention is to bring supplementary guidance to the PHES committee, which would provide further detail of how this policy would be implemented. So there's opportunity for members of the public and groups and organisations to respond to the draft supplementary guidance that will be considered.
Councillor McKee, are you... Right. Are there any other ones on the issue regarding tourism? Move on to issue 7, mineral assets, starting page 86 and finishing in page 99. Councillor Driver.
I understand mineral extraction is a licence from the government that actually takes that particular thing. However, when we've looked at previous applications, there are some which have been minor applications, but if you look at what's actually happening on the ground, they would have become major applications, particularly in Cannon area. I do have some concerns that if individuals who develop bring forward application forms for individual wells, for instance, and it ends up being 22 in that particular case, then that is a major application as far as that particular developer is concerned. However, there is some information that can allow them, there are some practices that allow them to put 2 in at a time. I'm just wondering if there's something within to make sure that if there is any problems later on, understanding that, for instance, the fracking issue or the coal methane extraction issue in Falkirk is going to public inquiry, then we have sufficient information within these policies and procedures that we can make good, determined applications.
Mr. Rogers.
Chair, the purpose of the policy here, policy ED14 on minerals, is to provide an overall policy framework within which the council can then determine planning applications as and when they come forward. And it's certainly considered that the approach set out in policy ED14 is sufficiently robust to enable us to carry that out satisfactorily.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. It's one specific item. It's representation by ADVAT TMC Limited 88 Resources on page 88, where they're looking to have the restoration bonds reconfigured. Another proposal on page 97, where we are proposing to add a suitable alternative scheme. Now, those members in this chamber will be aware that ADVAT have collapsed, that there's an unmitigated disaster left in the Kirkconnell area of an open cast site that was absolutely abandoned. And maybe for the intervention with Dumfries and Galloway Council working with Clear Estates and the Scottish Government, that would have been left as a terrible legacy for the Kirkconnell people. So I want an absolute guarantee that if we amend this wording, there is still a definite assurance and protection for communities that are affected by mineral extraction. I wouldn't want this to be softened somehow and allow the same thing to happen elsewhere. We're lucky that we're having our problem dealt with. Had it arisen somewhere else, that might not be the case. So I have a great concern about that, and I want an absolute assurance that the protection will be there for communities with the wording that's eventually put in this document.
Mr. Rogers, can you make sure or give the comfort to the member that that will be the case, that we have protection?
Yes, certainly. The intention behind accepting the additional wording, which refers to or suitable alternative scheme, is meant to reflect the fact that there is currently under consideration by Scottish ministers an alternative approach to financial bonding requirements, and one which provides a sufficient level of protection for local communities and indeed for exposure of risk by councils. The issue really relates to having a suitable financial mechanism in place to achieve that, and the policy as originally drafted was a bit too restrictive in only referring to one specific financial mechanism and not leaving the option open for the inclusion of alternative, equally suitable schemes.
Happy with that explanation, Chair.
With that, is there any other points on Item 7, mineral assets. Move on to issue 8, housing. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Policy H1 housing land representations made from Annandale Estates, Persimmon Homes, Roger Tim and Partners and others. Can the Planning Authority confirm that sites designated post-2024 can be brought forward into the 2014-24 period if the opportunity presents itself? And would Mr Rogers give me examples of how this could be progressed? And secondly, could Mr Rogers explain how the existing sites could be deemed ineffective if not developed in the first 5 years of the plan, as alluded to in Planning Advice Note 2 in the Housing Land Report?
And just, that's page 100 to 114 for the Mr Rogers.
Chair, yes, the issue raised in these representations relates to policy H1 on housing land and the allocation of specific sites for the delivery of housing development. The plan sets out our intention to not only allocate sufficient sites in the short to medium term, i.e. the period up to 2024, to ensure that there's a generous supply of housing sites across the region, but also to give indication to future for future development were required by Scottish planning policy to give an indication of the likely future priorities for development, and we've done that by allocating some sites as post-2024. Now, there is a degree of flexibility that's built into the policy in that if there are sites that are included in the short to medium term housing land supply which encounter difficulties in terms of being brought forward, then those difficulties would be picked up as part of our annual housing land supply audit, and that would then provide the basis for alternative sites which have been identified post-2024 to be brought forward and accelerated, provided some of the potential physical and infrastructure constraints have been addressed. So there is flexibility built into the second part of policy H1A to allow that to happen. The way in which sites are assessed for effectiveness, as Councillor Peacock has pointed out, is actually set out for us in guidance from the Scottish Government, and it includes a list of criteria that we use to assess sites, and that includes things like land ownership and the willingness of owners to see their sites being developed, but it also includes physical constraints, contamination, access issues, and a range of related things which indicate to us the likelihood of a site being developed in the short term, i.e. a 5-year period.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. On a follow-on for that, in the policy H4, housing development immediately outside settlement boundaries, you're saying there that your house and land audit would identify areas that were not being effective, and that would give the opportunity for sites that are identified in 2024 to be brought forward. What about sites, or what about areas that don't have any sites identified post-2024, i.e. Stranraer, and as regard the policy that was, or the wordings of the policy that was in the document issued in November 2012 to committee, it says that it will be identified, a shortfall identified by the Council through the house and land audit with regard to provision of an effective 5-year house and land supply in the house and market area. Now, when you go and look at the published document for the Stranraer HMA, it gives you two lists. It says an established supply would be a total unit of 781. However, the effective supply in the document says 303. Which one is it? Is it 781 or is it 303 in the Stranraer HMA? My reading of that would be, yeah, there's sites that are going to give you 781 units, but effectively you've only got sites that will give you 303 units.
Chair, yes, the bigger figure relates to the 12-year period up to 2024. The smaller figure refers to the 5-year effective housing land supply that we're required to maintain. So yes, it's what you're saying is correct. There is only 300, I can't remember the figure, sorry, but there is only 300 odd houses currently considered to be effective in that housing market area during the 5-year period. If I could maybe respond as well to the other point that you raised quite correctly, this approach of bringing forward development that's phased beyond 2024 is only going to be effective in housing market areas where such sites have been identified. And as Councillor McClellan points out, within the Stranraer housing market area, there are no sites identified beyond 2024. So the flexibility in that situation is provided, first of all, by the policy relating to infill and windfall sites, which is Part B of Housing Land Policy H1, which provides for non-allocated or non-identified sites that come up during the plan period to be brought forward, together with Policy H4, which allows housing developments immediately outside settlement boundaries to be considered, again on the basis that there is insufficient land within the effective 5-year housing land supply. So those two together provide that additional flexibility in housing market areas where there is no supply identified beyond 2024.
Yeah, just to follow up that, it's insufficient supply of land. Who deems it insufficient? I don't wish to stray into item 29, however, you have sites that are identified in this LDP in the Stranraer area that have planning permission since 2009 that haven't been. So when is a site deemed as insufficient or not capable of being developed or not wanting to be developed?
It's assessed essentially through the annual housing land audit, which we do in conjunction with developers and landowners, and we're reliant on them to update us on their progress and their intent in terms of bringing sites forward. If there are sites that are brought to our attention that are encountering difficulties in terms of being delivered, then we would consider removing them from the effective 5-year housing land supply.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. It's on page 106, Lordburn Housing Association, their representation in relation to particular needs housing, and they speak specifically about a region with an ageing population, but we now have a new client group because of the introduction of the bedroom tax. And I'm satisfied with the response on page 114, and no doubt it will embrace that. I just think maybe it should be mentioned specifically in it that they too will be covered by the local development or the local housing strategy. Because just expanding that, we're now needing to provide one-bedroom houses to try and address an issue that has risen very recently as a consequence of the introduction of the bedroom tax.
That's certainly an issue that would be picked up in the review of the local housing strategy, which then informs the content of the local development plan. The precise details of the mix of affordable housing to be provided associated with any one development is generally a matter of agreement between ourselves, our colleagues in housing services, and the developer.
I think that's right, Chair, but I think as a council you've now asked for a minimum of, and that will be part of the local housing strategy, I'm sure, but there is a specific reference to that now.
Is that correct, that we have a specific reference to that?
So I could maybe just ask for some clarification of the specific point again.
I think it was agreed at the Planning, Housing and Environment Services Committee, and it was certainly discussed at the Housing Subcommittee, that now when a new development takes place, we will require, if it's social housing, a specific number of one-bedroom houses to be included in the development. And it doesn't specifically identify them for people impacted on by the bedroom tax, but that's no doubt the client group that we're trying to target because of their circumstances. I'm just hoping that and I know that the response actually covers it. I just wanted to raise the matter to bring to your attention the fact that it's not specifically written into the policy, but an assurance should be given that it will form part of the policy.
Yeah, Jess, I understand fully the issue. It is the intention to produce supplementary guidance to this policy, and we're going to work closely with our colleagues in housing services in producing that guidance, and I would envisage that such guidance would include reference to the point that's been raised by Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor McClung, it was the same point?
Yeah, it's just, from my memory, it's 20% one bedroom, but not necessarily in every development that's in the SHIP. It will be 20% one bedroom, but it will depend on demand on the individual developments in the SHIP.
Same point, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, Chair, it's the same point in terms of it's, in my opinion, the reduction, what I thought was 25% of affordable houses down to 20, and then the trigger of 15 and so forth. But within that, then it's clarification on the definition as to what is an affordable house and how that impacts on the rented sector, which are two separate issues in terms of that we still get rented houses within any forthcoming developments against, what is the definition of affordable houses, which still might not be to satisfy the rented sector and the one-bedroom houses that's being referred to.
Will that also be picked up in the supplementary planning guidance?
It will, and part of the purpose of the supplementary guidance will be to expand on what is meant by affordable housing. There is a definition currently contained within the plan, but that probably needs to be detailed out a bit further to reflect the wide range of provision that's envisaged in Scottish planning policy, ranging from social rented housing right the way through to shared equity arrangements.
Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. I think my point has been partly answered, I think, by Councillor McClung's question in regards to the timeline, which Craig Peacock brought up originally. Primarily, I'm trying to put it in the most simplest terms that I can. It's because of the issues that have been raised with me, the 2024 timeline and the 5-year effective housing supply that we have. If a site in the next 5 years, because I know we've been through a rigorous process in regards to identifying sites that are actually achievable, if say a site in the next 5 years that's been identified doesn't come forward with an application, does that deem it ineffective?
That would certainly be picked up in the annual housing land audit process, and the failure of a landowner or developer to come forward with a planning application during that 5-year period would be a strong indication that that site is not effective and would therefore could potentially be removed from the housing land supply at that point.
Councillor Litt.
Thank you, Chair. My point is on Policy H2, pages 102 and 103. I compare and contrast the responses of two different organisations which seem to be diametrically different. Lordburn Housing Association on page 103 seems quite content with what they consider the significantly more scope for development in villages. And then I look at Smith's score on behalf of the Crown Estate on page 102, and they seem to be rather anxious about the lack of, as they see, the lack of clarity. Interesting that the Crown Estate seems to be worried about spending money on professional fees. It must be a sign of the times. However, I would like assurances from the planners that are we still in the business of pre-application and formal consultation and advice. I mean, I think that would bring comfort to people who do not seem to have the clarity they wish.
We certainly continue to provide pre-application advice. However, probably the biggest thing that people are looking for is some clearer and stronger guidance in terms of planning policies. So the inclusion of policy H2 on housing development in villages, which would be supplemented by some detailed supplementary guidance setting out the planning authority's expectations of how that development should happen, would be, I think, extremely welcome by applicants.
So, can I take from that we are looking in the future for some useful supplementary advice and guidance?
The supplementary guidance on housing in villages has already been published as a draft. It went to PHES committee back in January and has been out to public consultation. A further report will come back to PHES on the outcome of that consultation process and any further changes or amendments to the supplementary guidance, but that won't happen until after the LDP as a whole has been adopted.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point that I wonder if Mr Rogers would be amenable to a small non-notifiable change to policy H1, H1A, allocated sites. It's on page 27 of the plan produced for us. And it reads at the moment, sites allocated for housing after 2024 can only be brought forward for development during the 12-24 period, where the annual housing land audit clearly demonstrates that an effective 5-year land supply is not being maintained for the housing market area concerned. And I wonder if that could possibly be changed to sites allocated for housing after 2024 can be assessed to be brought forward for development. I believe that would allow the greater flexibility that Mr Rogers offered us prior to his explanations about the possibility of bringing sites forward.
Chair, I mean, clearly that's a matter for members as to how they would like to make modifications to the plan. From my perspective, if we're looking to communicate greater clarity around this flexibility, then certainly that is a modification that would be acceptable from my perspective, but it's really a matter for members to decide what changes at this point they want to make to the plan.
Just if it's notifiable or non-notifiable, I think that would be the point for myself.
Chair, certainly I would consider that to be a non-notifiable modification. It's not changing, it's not materially changing the policy, it's simply providing additional clarity.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, my original point has been dealt with, but ever opportunistic, Leah, I would suggest, in fact, what Councillor Peacock is suggesting makes eminent good sense. It can only be a good thing to provide additional clarity on the issue of flexibility, because the issue of flexibility, obviously, Leader, will be extremely important in the taking forward of this plan, and I have no compunction in supporting that.
Councillor Driver.
Yeah, Chairman, Councillor Geddes said exactly what I was going to say. I'm quite happy with the slight amendment in that.
Councillor McClung.
I'm sorry, I was out of the room. Is that just the sites that are identified after 2024, or is it for any site in a housing area that doesn't have sites identified after 2024?
Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, Chair, I was just going with the policy H1A, as I say, the second paragraph there, and that was my intended amendment, and I would move that if that would be the case.
My understanding it is just sites after 2024 that have been identified, they can be according to the paragraph. Are members happy with that amendment? Right. Move on to issue 9, page 115 to 127, housing in the countryside. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to raise a matter here. It concerns two representations here. Robert Potter and Partners representation on page 121. And Withdrawn and District Community Council representation on the same page. I've looked at these representations and I would like to propose a non-notifiable modification to this policy, that's H3, to replace the first policy criteria. Now, the policy is on page 28 of the proposed local development plan. And I'm talking about the first bullet point, and I should like to replace that first bullet point with a fairly similar, but not entirely similar, in response to the representatives, to say, is within or well related to a small building group which is either identified on the existing lists, see supplementary guidance, or is defined as 5 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other to create a sense of place. Leader, if that's agreed, I request that officers make the necessary changes as a non-notifiable modification on the appropriate schedule. It is my view that this provides clarification to the public. I agree with the representatives in this particular instance who would provide certainty through the small building groups lists. Thank you.
With regard, I think it's to the point, are you able to incorporate that within the plan under the, it was said to be a non-notifiable change?
Chair, it certainly it wouldn't change the overall intent and purpose of that policy H3. It's an adjustment to one of the criteria, and it certainly addresses some of the concerns and issues raised in the representations. So from that perspective, I would consider that to be a non-notifiable modification to the plan.
Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Chair. I think I heard the amendment. I haven't got the paperwork in front of me. I haven't brought it with me, the actual plan which is referring to. Can I hear the existing policy being read out as well, please? Or proposed, I should say.
Mr. Rogers, have you got it in front of you? Yeah.
The existing policy H3, housing in the countryside, the council will support housing proposals in the countryside where the proposal meets one or more of the following criteria. First bullet point is within or well related to a small building group defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other to create a sense of place. So that's the original wording contained in the proposed plan.
Councillor Crothers.
Yep, my preference is to keep it more flexible, and I prefer that word than 3.
Councillor Geddes.
I would certainly support that, sir. You know, while I've already indicated, clarity is a good idea. I think there's sometimes you can become a wee bit too prescriptive, and I would be inclined to support Councillor Crothers on if he's making that an amendment.
So we have a proposal on that one to remain. We have an amendment to change.
Chair, could I just, as a point of clarification here, there was another aspect to the amendment which was to relate this bullet point to the existing list of small building groups that have been established through the current process.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor McCaughtrey.
I just want to ask the reason why we want to increase it from 3 to 5. When Jane said wanted to make it 5 instead of 3, we didn't have a reason for it. What would the reason be for increasing the number from 3 to 5 properties?
Thank you. My view is similar to the representatives, which is that I think at the moment, very largely, the small building groups consist of largely five groups, and I think we are in danger in the future, I suspect, of creating a system where we have an unsustainable level of development in the countryside. I think the 5 would give a body of groups, but nevertheless I would point out to people that there are small building groups now with 3. I'm thinking about the sustainability in the future, which is part of Scottish planning policy.
Councillor Crothers.
Happy to add the second part in regards to what's already been identified as being contained within it, but I would like to leave it at 3, please.
Councillor McComb.
Point of clarification, Chair. The statement which was read out with regard to policy was the existing policy, not the policy proposed in the LDP. What Councillor Maitland was suggesting was a change, a very minor change to the policy proposed in the LDP.
It was the policy in the proposed LDP that I read out.
Yep, the proposed LDP policy as stated here refers to 3 buildings, and Mrs Maitland was suggesting 5 rather than 3. Can I continue, Chair? One of the reasons why she was suggesting that is the fact that if you set it at 3, there are many farmsteadings throughout Dumfries and Galloway which would then qualify as small building groups. And you'd finish up with a lot of the development taking place in these small building groups rather than in the villages where there are existing services provided.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I would suggest from 3 to 5 is a major change and would have a huge implication for a lot of these folks that are hoping to move into the countryside to retire for whatever reason. Folks should be allowed to aspire to greater things, if that's a terminology you find useful. But I think the problem is, if you start at 5, you've got a big settlement already and you're just going to expand it, whereas we have many, and I can give you lots of examples where we have 3 properties and we've made provision for 1 more. That's a reasonable approach that this council has taken over a long period of time, and I for one would certainly not support the change or proposed change.
Councillor Driver.
Yes, I was just going back to what Jenny said earlier on about the farm standings. I mean, there is a list of small building groups within Dumfries and Galloway anyway, so it wouldn't be adding to those small building groups. The proposed change, I think, as Councillor Dempster says, will be a massive increase in that, and I think we should go with the proposal as is.
Jane, do you have a seconder? Just Councillor McComb. if you could just clarify the differences.
Thank you, Leader. You have a motion and amendment. The motion is by Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Ian Carruthers, seconded by Councillor Geddes. And that is policy H3, the first bullet point, remain as is in the proposed local development plan. The amendment is by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McComb, and that is that the first bullet point within policy H3 in the plan be amended to read as follows. Is within or well related to a small building group which is either identified in the existing lists, brackets, see supplementary guidance, close brackets, or is defined as 5 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other to create a sense of place. Are members happy to proceed to the vote?
Councillor Carruthers.
Just for clarity, because I did add a bit on, because Councillor Maitland, I said I would take a second part into consideration, but by default it might already apply. And that she spoke about the small building group as supplementary planning guidance. I felt that should be added, as well as 3 and above. But if we're using the criteria based on 3 above already would supersede and include what's already identified within supplementary planning guidance, happy with what's being proposed.
Chair, could I clarify that matter, because it's quite important in terms of framing the amendment correctly. The policy as proposed in the LDP would supersede the existing established identified small building groups, so they would essentially be put to one side and be replaced by this new policy and by the supplementary guidance. So the amendment that has been put forward, I understand from both proposals, from both proposers, envisages in making specific reference in this bullet point to the existing supplementary, to the existing small building groups. So it's just as a point of clarity. If the policy stays as it is, then the existing small building groups would in time just fall.
And the question I was putting for absolute clarity was, would 3 and above bring like an umbrella approach to what's already within the supplementary planning guidance? I would imagine, maybe you can't answer the question, maybe that information is not in front of you, but I would imagine that it would have superseded, like you're saying, but it would have took them in as a matter of course. But if it's not, I'd like to be explicit about it.
It would supersede the small building groups that we currently have are supplementary guidance, but they are supplementary to the existing local plans. When the new LDP is adopted, all of the existing local plans and all of the existing supplementary guidance then falls and is replaced. So the new supplementary guidance, which would support this policy, would then have to restate all of the existing small building groups. However, that was not the intention, and that's not what is written in the proposed plan. So if members want to change that, then that would have to be a modification to the plan, to this plan.
I suppose I'll come back to my prior question, is it notifiable? If we add in the supplementary planning guidance as being part of the proposal as well as 3 and above, would that be a non-notifiable change or notifiable?
In determining whether this would be notifiable, we have to take a view on whether this is a significant change to the policy. Now, the policy itself covers a number of different areas. The debate is purely about one of those criteria. There are 5 other criterion, as well as a separate set of bullet points related to single houses in the countryside. So in that context, to change one of those bullet points would, in my view, constitute a non-notifiable modification.
Could I just have, if we add in the supplementary guidance, which has identified small building groups which are not suitable in the current one, and we add that in, does that mean to say we are actually saying those ones can go ahead and those ones can't? Whereas the current one is if they've got 3 houses in it and it meets a criteria, we can go ahead. But if we put in the old guidance where it has small building groups and small building groups which aren't suitable, does that mean to say we're then excluding them from being taken forward?
No, all we would be including in the new supplementary guidance is the actual maps showing the currently approved small building groups to make sure that they would be incorporated into any new supplementary guidance should members want to change the policy as it's currently presented.
I'm not sure I can.
Right. Going forward, we have currently, is it GP 16 or 15? I can't remember the small build 16, where it has a list of small building groups. It has a list of small building groups not suitable and areas that have been assessed as not being small building groups. I can't remember. I think there's 3 different kinds. Will they be taken forward as is now if it's added in? Therefore, this one village or one small building group may be eligible, but the other one which was identified isn't eligible. Are we taking that forward, or are we just saying with the new criteria and those ones will be considered as well?
We would be taking forward the currently identified acceptable small building groups, if you like, and providing a policy basis on which any new proposals coming forward under this new plan could then be assessed. So we would have a mix of both. You would have the existing small building groups being imported, if you like, into the new plan, plus these bullet points would provide a policy framework for new small building groups to come forward and be assessed.
That's exactly how I envisaged it, exactly as Mr Rogers has read it out or instructed it.
Therefore, with that, are we then looking at a non-notifiable amendment?
Yes, Chair.
Can I just get clarity, Chair, please? I have a motion by Councillor Cross, seconded by Councillor Geddes, and when I read this, as I understand it, bullet point 1 is within or well related to a small building group which is either identified in the existing lists, brackets see supplementary guidance, or is defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other to create a sense of place. The amendment by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McComb, then substitutes, has exactly the same wording, but substitutes the word 3 for the word 5. Sorry, 5 for the word 3. Is that correct? Yes. I'm looking at Councillor Maitland specifically. You're saying 5 rather than 3. Right. The members understand. Thank you. Leader, are you ready to proceed to the vote?
Yes.
Leader.
Motion.
Deputy Leader.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Brady.
Amendment.
Councillor Crossley.
Motion.
Councillor Carver-Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Motion.
Councillor Davidson. Councillor Davidson. Sorry, thank you. Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Barbara.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson. Amendment. Councillor Foster.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Galloway.
Amendment.
Provost Green.
Motion.
Councillor Rowland. Councillor Leader.
Motion.
Councillor McCortree.
Motion.
Councillor McClellan.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Mayo.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall. Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Nicholl. Motion. Councillor Ogilvie. Motion. Councillor Peacock. Amendment. Councillor Prentice. Amendment. Councillor Scrooby. Motion. Councillor Smith. Motion. Councillor Stitt. Motion. Councillor Salmon. Motion. Councillor Tate. Motion. Councillor Stephen Thompson. Amendment. Councillor Ted Thompson. Motion. Councillor Tuckfield. Motion. Councillor Witts. Motion. Councillor Wood. Motion. And Councillor Walker. Motion. The motion is carried by 33 votes to 11.
We want to issue 10 from page 128 to page 138, historic environment. There's no amendments. That is agreed. Issue 11, page 139 to 162, natural environment. Happy with that? Right, we'll move on to issue 12, which is page 163 to 167, community services and facilities. There's no amendments, we're happy to agree. Right. Move on to issue 13, which is page 168.
225.
To 225. There's no issues. Take that as agreed. Alright. Move on to item 14, page 226 to 234, infrastructure. Take that as the response to the agreed. Item 15, pages 235 to 238, transport. Everyone agreed? Issue 16, page 239 to 241. Proposals, maps and Appendix 4 glossary. No issue with that one. Right. Move on to the next section, which is settlement statements and inset maps. We're starting with issue 17, which is settlements, statements and inset maps and in housing market area district centres. Pages 242 to page 265. Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm happy with the bulk of this, but I'm looking for it. I don't see it in front of me at the moment, but certainly there was representations made from Eastrigg, Sederunt and Creaker Community Council in regards to the particular settlement sites identified at that time. I'm just trying to find them. I don't see them in front of me in here. Are they in here? Are they, just for clarity? Pardon?
Councillor Crothers, could you move the mic just a wee bit closer to you?
Okay, certainly I'll do that. I'm just saying it's in regards to representations on issue 17 where Eastrigg, Sederunt and Creaker Community Council made representations. I'm just looking for them.
Chair, that's covered under issue 18, the next one.
Okay, thank you.
That if there's no other issues under 17. No. Agree that. Move on to issue 18. Settlement statement and inset maps and in HMA local centres, page 266 to 277. Councillor Crothers.
Thanks. Just in reference, I suppose the first point, taking into consideration what Eastrigg, Sederunt and Creaker Community Councils have pointed out in regards to the sites where they feel the settlement, there's two main points they have raised, but in regards to where the settlement should be taken, the site should be identified within Eastrigg's settlement. If that was to be applied at this stage, if we were to change that, would that be notifiable or non-notifiable?
Mr. Rogers.
Just for clarification, are we talking about an amendment to the settlement boundary?
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's what they declared. They from memory more than anything, when I had it being discussed at one of the meetings, with the media representation, it was moving the identified settlement that's been envisaged, development, sorry, rather than settlement, to more of the west, more central towards Eastrigg, rather as belonging out to the east of the settlement in Eastrigg. So they were quite specific when I was at that meeting. I don't see maybe. I don't know how it just reads out in here exactly, but they felt that, I don't think they were against the development to the east of the region, but certainly they felt that there should be development at the centre, at the hub, round about the station and such like, so it would be a change in settlement boundaries, certainly.
Chair, it's quite a difficult one to advise on without knowing the detail of the change, because the test is whether it's a significant change to a policy or proposal in the plan. So what we would have to do is to look at the extent of change that's being proposed to the settlement boundary. But my initial advice is that that's potentially going to be notifiable depending on how much change we're talking about. If it's a minor adjustment to the settlement boundary, then that would probably be non-notifiable. If it's a substantial change to the boundary, incorporating a whole lot of new land into the settlement boundary, then my feeling is that would probably be notifiable. The other issue that I wanted to raise in connection with this, which maybe goes some way to addressing the concerns and issues that are raised here, is that the plan does contain flexibility to bring additional sites forward, even if they're out with the settlement boundary. So that's why this time round policy H4 has been put in to allow sites that are out with the settlement boundary to be brought forward should there be any difficulties in bringing forward any of the allocated sites. Proposals for business uses can be assessed under the economic development policies of the plan, and sites that are out with the settlement boundary, which are related to employment generation, for example, can be considered as well during the plan period. So we'll have to bear in mind that there is that additional flexibility that is built into the proposed plan.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks. It's on page 270 at Echo Thick sites previously assessed land at Perris or Farm. The question asked earlier on regard the importance of the M74 corridor. Obviously there is interest from particular developers in that particular area. I just want confirmation that other areas out with the local development plan, if there are seen to be a proper and well-developed business plan, that will be taken into consideration.
Yes, Chair, sorry, I'm just confirming the exact policy that refers to this, because it is an important point. It's policy ED1 in the proposed plan allows for business and industrial development on unallocated land, if I can spit my words out. So that would enable development proposals which envisage the creation of new employment opportunities and new business opportunities to be dealt with on their merits as they come forward, rather than having to be restricted to allocated sites.
With that, if there's no amendments being put forward, can we agree the representations to be put forward to the reporter? Move on to item 19, settlement statements and inset maps, Estill housing market area, pages 278 to 281. Right, if there's no amendments. Right. Now move on to item 20. I'll hand over to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you. On to 20, to page 282 to page 321. Settlement statements and inset maps, Dumfries housing. Councillor Roper.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Page 286, James T. Maitland and Brown's Food Group. Well-established businesses at the adjacent industrial estate can be noisy and work long hours. It's essential that significant buffer zones are provided to prevent future conflict between business and residential uses. I think this is extremely important. We have so little industry left in this region that it is vitally important that we protect them. Industry, not only the noise that they generate at the moment, but if they have to change their business in any way, they may have to employ methods that are making more noise than they do at present, and they should be protected at all costs from any complaints in the future from the development. So whatever measures need to be put in place, buffer zones, building noise attenuation measures, but these should be protected at all costs.
Thank you. I think that was the principle behind Councillor Gilroy's earlier motion. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. Drawing attention to Barron Hill. What are our, we allocate land, page 284 and 285. We allocate land, and the land is wet. The developer doesn't seem to be interested in draining the land properly. Existing tenants are unable to use their back gardens because of the wet. And as I say, the developers not wanting to do anything about it. And they're indicating that they've got control of this additional site that's in that area. Is there anything we can do to ensure that proper attenuation, water attenuation, all that sort of thing, proper drainage is put in place, even if it's for previous housing that's already completed? Because I feel that we have a responsibility when we're identifying land. We have a responsibility to ensure that any developer does the job properly, ensures that people have dry gardens, are able to use their gardens and all that sort of thing. So I was just wondering what our responsibility is with regard to that, how we can enforce that sort of project, if you like.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Chair, the matter of drainage on a site is dealt with as a detail as part of the planning application process. The site in question, Dumfries H1 at Barn Hill, just for absolute clarity, the issue is not flooding, the issue is one of drainage, and that would be dealt with as a matter of detail under the planning application. The report that you have does suggest an amendment, a variation to a modification to the plan to take account of concerns that have been raised in representations concerning drainage, and it's to make it absolutely clear that a drainage and ground investigation report will also be required for this site, and that wording is at the top of page 302. As part of the proposed council response to the issues raised by the representatives.
Thank you. Councillor McKee. Sorry, Chair, thanks. Can we enforce retrospective action? Although they're moving into a new site which we believe is wet anyway, the houses adjoining that, which are already occupied, have got this issue, and can we take retrospective action?
Thank you. I recognise what Councillor McKee is saying here, that where developers have undertaken to put proper drainage systems in place on developments, that's not necessarily taking place. Succeeding owners of properties then discover that they have inherited something that hasn't actually been actioned on the part of the developer, which they have, as the owners of the properties jointly, a responsibility. We don't seem, as an authority, to have, in some instances, ensured that the appropriate measures had been taken from the outset in the completion of those developments. And then that difficulty is being inherited by successive occupants and further developments in those same locations. So it's a case of what enforcement measures are we in place to do to ensure that people get what they pay for, and that we don't inherit responsibilities and liabilities that developers initially in a development set out to say they were going to do.
Chair, no, you're quite correct. It is an ongoing issue, and it's an issue on the earlier phases of this site that we're well aware of. There's not really anything in this plan that we can do to tackle that issue. That's an ongoing statutory issue that we have with regard to the enforcement of planning conditions attached to planning applications.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, Mr. Rogers, do you have any comment, Councillor Wiper, on Councillor Wiper's points that reflected back, as I suggested, to what Councillor Galloway had previously spoken of in terms of land conflict?
Certainly, the intention here that I've taken from members is to strengthen that overall policy to ensure that the issue of land use conflict is a clear criteria within our overall assessment of developments using policy OP1. So in future, that approach would certainly address this issue of the potential for noise conflict between existing established businesses and newly proposed housing sites.
Councillor Wiper.
Chair, thank you. I know there's a noise assessment survey to be carried out in this particular site. It's just what happens if the business has to change the way it operates to secure its future and the future of its employees, and by doing that they actually create more noise than they were at the time that the housing settlement was granted permission. What happens if the noise increases? Do then the residents of the housing settlement have a case to come against the people who are working in the industrial site?
That's certainly an issue that would be dealt with through environmental protection legislation rather than through planning legislation.
Okay, thank you. I have no other questions. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, one of the reasons why I suppose there is a conflict in that particular part of Dumfries is the fact that the vast majority of areas in the town that are allocated for housing are in the east of the town. It's a sort of Lockerbie Road, Heath Hall area, where almost all, apart from the small pockets in Barnhill that Councillor McKee referred to, and also Ladyfield, that all the housing is in the east side of Dumfries, and there is very, very little on the west side of Dumfries. And my fear is that in the past that we've effectively allowed development to take place in the south of Dumfries up in the Crichton area that has resulted in significant traffic congestion, and what we're in danger of doing again is producing traffic congestion in other parts of Dumfries because we focus almost all the development of housing in that part of Dumfries. It's only a matter of time before road access into the town centre from the Lockerbie Road, Edinburgh Road, becomes incredibly congested, and we create the same problem there that we've actually created in the south side of Dumfries, because we effectively cram in developments to push our current infrastructure to its limit, rather than actually look to carry out developments in such a way that you actually expand the infrastructure. And I just wonder, on a general point, what are we actually doing in our allocation of land in Dumfries to actually expand the roads infrastructure in the area, rather than simply try to squeeze the life out of the existing infrastructure? Because there are parts of Dumfries that have been excluded from development of housing because there's no infrastructure there. So rather than saying subject to infrastructure, we've basically said we'll squeeze the living daylights out of our existing infrastructure, and then we'll have a problem in 5 years' time of traffic congestion in other parts of the town because we've focused all our housing development in certain areas.
Comment, Mr. Rogers?
Chair, yes, a couple of comments. First of all, the proposals in the plan, the package of development sites has been assessed through traffic modelling, particularly with reference to Dumfries, where they have an established Dumfries traffic modelling package that has been run using the development scenarios that are outlined in the plan. So that has been taken on board. Members will be aware that there are a number of short-term road improvement measures under consideration by the Council, but there is nothing that would prevent further development from happening. The other thing to point out is that for the first time in this plan, we have introduced a developer contributions policy. So if there are infrastructure improvements that are needed, whether that's to our road network or indeed to our schools or community facilities as a result of development coming forward, then we now have a clear and transparent mechanism for requiring developers to make a fair contribution towards meeting those costs.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I have a query regarding Catherine Field Farm, page 287. a representation received from Robert Potter and Partners on behalf of the Henderson Families Partnership. They were saying the site was included in the further consultation on sites and policies as a recommended site for the period 2019 and 2024. However, in our council officers' recommendation, this should go beyond 2024. I have read the report from council officers, but I would like to hear further comments from Mr. Rogers, please.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers?
Yes, Chair. The issues surrounding the allocation of that particular site relate to the requirement for the developers and landowners to satisfy us concerning access and road infrastructure constraints, which have been identified in terms of bringing that site forward for development. That's why the site has actually been allocated for the period beyond 2024. However, as we have previously explained, there is flexibility built in to the plan to allow development to be accelerated should it be required in the short to medium term. I would also draw members' attention to comments that are contained in our response, which encourage the owners of this site, together with the adjacent two sites at Penmans and Currys European, to consider coming forward with a combined approach to that as a single development opportunity on the basis of a master plan. And we are suggesting some amendments to the wording of the plan to recognise the existence of that potential development opportunity. So there is another route which could be pursued in terms of accelerating the site at Catherine Field.
Thank you. Councillor Wynne?
Is that means we don't need to do anything today to put any motion or amendment? We'll leave it to council officers' hand?
Essentially, I think that's the guidance that the owners of the sites have received. Mr. Rogers?
Chair, it's a matter for members if they wish to pursue a further amendment or modification to the plan.
Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the point, I don't know if it's the exact same point as Councillor Smith alluded to earlier, but in regards to Mr. Rogers has alluded to as developers' contributions, I think we maybe have missed a trick here. In this one, certainly, maybe we picked up in later development plans, depending on whether there's any notifiable amendments that made to do that are acceptable. And if that is the case, I may well come back and revisit this. But I think at the east end of Dumfries, especially the link between, and as far as transport is concerned, between the Crichton campus and the A75 for that potential southern bypass link, I think we could have encouraged development in that area, which could have, at the same time, we could have got developers to contribute in such a way it could have put that link road through for us, but we'll maybe pick up on that in the future.
Okay, thank you. Again, in the absence of no other indications of any questions, can I assume that issue 20 is accepted? Okay, can we get the leader back in then, please?
Move on now to issue 21. page 322 to 335. Settlement statements and inset maps, Dumfries business and industry, retail and general issues. There's no issues. Issue 22, settlement statements and inset maps, Moffat, pages 336 to 376. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just for reference to page 369 MOF.H4 Selkirk Road, obviously there's a number of representations being made, and I've sought further information from the planning officers at the recent seminars, which has been helpful, but I was just hoping that Mr Rogers could explain a little bit more about the proportionality of the development at Selkirk Road and how it mentions reference to a master plan as per site guidance on page 159 of the actual proposed LDP, and if you could maybe speak a bit more about how that would impact the nature of the possible development on that particular site, given the scale of the size of the site.
Mr Rogers.
Chair, certainly it's undeniable that this is a significant housing development opportunity in the context of the town of Moffat. There are very few opportunities for new development to take place within the town due to a wide range of constraints, not least of which is flooding issues, together with the desire to retain Moffat as an attractive small town with an important conservation area at its heart. The development of the site MOF-H4 is seen as being something that could actually make a positive contribution to the town in terms of placemaking, and the way to achieve that is through a master planned approach. It is a large site. However, it's certainly not envisaged that the entire area that's identified within the plan would actually be built on and developed. There will be significant requirements for landscaping provision, for open space provision. There is an area of the site which is affected by flooding, which can't be developed. So for that reason, it's suggested that a master plan would be brought forward to address those and to ensure that the development can actually form a new and attractive edge to the town of Moffat at that point. It's envisaged that the master plan would have to take into account existing landscape features, including things like the dry stone walls and existing trees and vegetation cover, in order to create this clearly definable edge, an attractive definable edge to the town at that point. The site itself is also well located in terms of accessibility to the town centre, and would add to the overall aim within the plan to support the future vitality and viability of Moffat as a community. It would certainly provide some additional footfall for local shops and local businesses, for example. And so it's seen as being integral to the whole approach of trying to support a future sustainable community within Moffat.
Thank you. I welcome that reply. Could I just for clarity, does that mean that any development on that site, given the nature of it and that it would have to be phased development, wouldn't go ahead without a master plan being carried out?
Yes, that's correct. It's absolutely essential that there is a master plan prepared and agreed with the Council's Planning Authority as part of bringing forward this site.
If there's no other comments, move on to issue 23, settlement statements and inset maps, Lochmaben, pages 377 to 398. If there's no comments, can we take that as agreed? Move on to issue 24, settlement statements and inset maps, Dumfries HMA District Centres, page 399 to 413. Councillor Dempster.
Observation, Chair. If you look at 404, Sanker Settlement Overview, and read what Architectural Heritage Society Scotland say, and you look at the response in page 407, it talks about the central historic core of the settlement designates a conservation area. The character there should be preserved and enhanced through high quality and appropriate design developments. In both Monaghan and Abbey, the conservation area covers a considerable part of the village, and both have a much more emphasised historic core and character. I want to take issue with that. First of all, the oldest post office in the world. The toll booth built in 1761, we've got Sanker Castle that was in the 15th century standing there. So that's wrong. But what worries me more is the fact that in the 60s, despite what it says in the document, or the 70s probably be more accurate, we built a block of flats in the middle of Sanker High Street. And all learning for our lessons, last year we approved another set of flats on Sanker High Street within the conservation area. And in my view, it will be less than an appropriate development, although that will remain to be seen when they're actually constructed. But I wonder why we're not prepared to accept the proposal, because it's bland enough that protects or tries to protect further the core of the settlement, and we're not doing it. And that's a matter of fact. We're not protecting it, so unless we can specify how development should be progressed to approval stage, then we'll never do it, and this would be some small way in doing that. I'd be interested to know why we're not prepared to embrace it, because it seems to me a non-notifiable change, and changes very, very little from what's proposed anyway.
Mr. Rogers.
Yep, certainly the representation and the comment relates to the text within the settlement overview. So there wouldn't be any change to a policy or a proposal from any amendment. The response is set out in page 407, as Councillor Dempster has said. Certainly that response could be edited to remove the offending sentence if that was required. No offence was intended by including that, but we could certainly delete that reference to Monaghan New Abbey, and certainly it's not in any way meant to underplay the importance of the historic centre of Sanker, and I think that is recognised in the response that's suggested there.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, I'm grateful to Mr. Rogers now. No, I'm not really offended by it, I just don't agree with it. No, I think the point I'm trying to make... the point I'm trying to make is that it would appear reading this that the representation for the Architectural Heritage Society talks about the settlement, whereas the response talks about the conservation area. And what I want is the settlement to be developed sensitively and recognising what's being suggested there, that there is a recognition that it's unique, and we should respect that. And as I say, it's blind, because appropriate densities are a thing for everybody's imagining of appropriate density will differ. So we're not being particularly specific. It just covers the whole of the town of Sanquhar as opposed to the conservation area that the officer has included in the response.
Chair, certainly the representation makes reference to the settlement. The issue that has been raised in the response on page 407 makes specific reference to the conservation area and the historic core, and the reason for doing that was just simply to highlight the relative importance of the historic core in the context of the wider settlement. But certainly if members were minded to propose an amendment to the plan, that would be considered to be a non-notifiable amendment.
If I were happy to accept that, I'd be grateful, Chair.
Are members happy to accept that?
Yep.
There's no other issues on 24. We'll move on to 25, page 414 to 428, settlement statements and inset maps, Dumfries HMA local centres. If there are no issues, move on to issue 26, page 429 to 444, settlement statements and inset maps, Mid-Galloway HMA district and local centres. If there's no comments, happy to agree that one. Move on to issue 27, settlement statements and inset maps, Stewart Tray HMA district centres, page 445 to 464. Councillor Maitland.
This is something which I should have brought up, and I apologise for not bringing it up earlier. My husband has made a representation here. He and I have no notifiable interest at all in it. Do I have to declare an interest because my husband is a representative? I apologise for that. Yes. Just make it completely clear. Thank you.
With that, is there any issues with regard to issue 27? If there's no issues, we'll take that as agreed. Move on to issue 28. We'll just give Councillor Maitland time to come back.
Unless her husband's made representations.
Issue 28 is settlement statements and inset maps, Stewart Tray HMA local centres, page 465 to 517.
Councillor Maitland.
No comments? No. There's no issues. I have to agree that one. Issue 29. Councillor Gilroy to come back. On to issue 29, which is settlement statements and inset maps, Stranraer, HMA District and Local Centres, page 518 to 525. Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It's regarding the site, the Low O'Neill, as we would say it across there, site reference 0211.001. The response is by the Council is shown on page 522. I've heard 2 or 3 times that policy H4 is going to give the opportunity to bring forward sites if those in the plan prove difficult to develop and are required in the short to medium term. What I would like is definitive answers in who defines the length of time in which a site in the plan is proven difficult to develop, what defines difficult, who decides that required in the short to medium term when the response to the representation actually says it will be considered in the preparation of the next plan, which the next plan is 5 years away. And going back to my previous question regarding the HMA and the numbers that were in it, does the sites that are identified in the plan it shows the number of units in Stranraer itself would be 581. Does those do any part of those 581 fall within what is shown in the HMA as the established supply, or are the additions to effective supply, because there was a fair difference in the number between what was the established supply and the effective supply for the number of units in Stranraer itself in the HMA in 2012.
Chair, as I've explained previously, the issue around monitoring the housing land supply sites is one that's done on an annual basis through the annual housing land audit process, and it's that process that would pick up if there were any issues or difficulties in terms of bringing sites forward. That would be a matter of judgment for us as the planning authority in terms of whether we were satisfied that a site was experiencing significant difficulties and wasn't likely to be developed within the 5-year period. That would then give the opportunity for alternative sites to come forward using that as a justification. I think within Stranraer there is a particular issue around the deliverability of the options on the waterfront, and we will obviously have to closely monitor that in the context of the overall housing land supply situation, because what we don't want to do is to stifle development in Stranraer just for the sake of waiting for substantial issues to be resolved at the waterfront. So that's why it's important that we do an annual monitoring process, and it's through that process that these alternative sites would be able to be brought forward. The other thing to say with regard to the plan review, although as Councillor McClung has correctly pointed out, there is a requirement for us to review the plan every 5 years. We would essentially have to start work on that more or less as soon as this plan has become adopted, in terms of reassessing the housing land supply situation in the housing market areas on the back of the review of the local housing strategy, which is due to be undertaken.
Just on that, will there be member input into the audit going year on year, so that, you know, if there's something not happening, we can feed in that we feel that something should come forward?
Chair, it's essentially a technical process. Where the member involvement comes is in terms of the sites that then come forward for consideration, because the majority of those sites would then go forward to the Planning Applications Committee as part of the planning application, and it would be for members then to assess as part of that process whether the arguments around housing land supply figures are sufficient to justify releasing that site. So that would be then a member decision.
Follow up, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I'm laying aside the waterfront development. I have absolutely no problems with what we're trying to do there. My reason for asking what is difficult to develop, what defines difficult, and the definition of short to medium term, is you have two sites that are in the plan, that were in the previous plan, that have planning permission from 2009. When does the time start when we start defining them as being difficult to develop, because they've had planning permission for more than 4 years now and nothing has happened?
Same subject, Councillor Scobie.
Indeed, it's the same subject, Chair, and Jim's spoken of a number, but the situation is compounded because, you know, we've got the monitoring, as Steve is saying, and how often it's monitored and what input there is to it. There is currently in the existing local plan, there have been, I think, 1, 2, at least 3 that I can think of that have not been developed, and they are being subject to land transaction and buy and sell that have never been developed. If the waterfront takes precedence, then, you know, against the other ones, then there could be further complications in terms of developed land. So I think the key word to this is flexibility, but it's against what's being said in terms of how often will it be monitored and reviewed, so that there is no stifling or the development in these sites, particularly in the Loch Neil. We've got Springbank, we've got Muirfield, against the waterfront that we want to see development on as well.
Councillor Dick, is it the same point, and then we'll get Mr Rogers to answer them all at once?
It was really just on the back of what Mr Rogers had said about reviewing annually. Does that mean we might be revisiting the town boundaries where development can take place on an annual basis? What exactly would this annual audit do?
So the annual audit is an audit of the allocated housing sites in the plan. It's not a review of the plan or the development and settlement boundaries. It's simply a review of the allocated housing sites, so that we can have an ongoing dialogue with house builders, developers and landowners as to the likelihood of those sites being delivered during the plan period.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thanks for your forbearance, Leader. I understand that it would be reviewed every year with the owners, the developers, etc., etc. When would the council actually turn round and say to the owners or developers of land that has had planning permission for the last 4 years that no, we're now going to say this is a difficult to develop area of land, which would then allow you to bring in policy H4?
Well, that would be reflected in the published housing land audit, which we publish every year and is public information.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, another issue in terms of Patrick and the local development plan and the representation that has been made by the Patrick Community Council, where it is identified, I think, the site in Patrick as 190 houses, while the Community Council are not talking about opposing the local development plan, it's the density of the site. And I know the summary refers to phased bases and the land allocation may be considered large. It's, you know, if we agree the local development plan identified against 190 houses, we've been here before, we were here before in terms of the Leswalt village, and here we might be facing the same issues of the community not accepting the density of that. And it's recognised that no modification proposed to the plan. How are we fixed in terms of identifying the density at 190 or indeed anywhere in the plan when the local community do not see this as, while they're not opposing the development plan, they don't see this as fitting with the village and the environment.
Mr. Rogers.
Chair, certainly this is considered to be a significant site, a large site in the context of Port Patrick, and it's considered that that would be built out over a pretty extensive period of time. The reason that a site of that scale had to be identified is really because there would be substantial infrastructure costs associated with bringing that site forward. So without having the viability of being able to develop on at a certain scale, the development is unlikely to ever happen. The issues around density and so on, and in particular fitting in with the village, require consideration through the master plan process. And that master plan process, as well as addressing issues like design and phasing, would also address issues such as density to make sure that it was appropriate for the location and fits in with the village. It's certainly our intention through this plan to encourage developers to up their game when it comes to the quality of new development. And I think that is a step change within this new plan compared to the previous plans.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. I hear what Steve's saying in the quality and up in the game, and to the point that Steve made that it might never happen. As soon as it was announced in terms of the consultation, the people of the village thought there was 190 houses going to be built the next day in that respect. So it's pretty brave of Steve to say it might never happen. There is developers already within the proposed development site, so be it that they are by home caravans, etc. So the land could be easily developed. It's that density and what we are bringing on by way of changing the character of the village and the community responds to that. And I wouldn't like to think we're making a rod for our own back on this one in terms of opposing what the community are saying.
With that, Steve?
Chair, just as a point of clarification, when I was referring to the site potentially not being developed, that was in the context of trying to explain why such a large site had to be allocated in order to ensure that the infrastructure costs associated with the site were capable of being covered. If we hadn't done that, then it's unlikely that a smaller scale site would be developed, was the point I was making.
With that, if there's no modifications, agreed. Right. Move on to issue 30, A74M Business and Industry Sites, page 526 to 531. No issues? I take that as agreed. Right. Right. We'll go back to recommendations. Recommendation 2.1 process and next stages in progressing the proposed local development plan to the examination stage as detailed at paragraph 3.5 in the report.
Noted.
2.2, consider the representations received to the proposed local development plan and agree the council's recommended responses. I take it that will be as amended in the Schedule 4 forms in Appendix 1 and the non-notifiable modifications listed in Appendix 2. 2.3, authorise officers to submit to Scottish Ministers a request to establish the examination process together with all required documentation including the Schedule 4 forms and to report back on the outcome of the examination prior to the adoption of the plan. Delegate authority to Head of Planning and Building Standards to make any final checks to deal with technical accuracy of the Schedule 4 forms and respond to any information requests received from the Directorate for Planning and Environmental Appeals as part of the examination process, and approve the Statement of Conformity at Appendix 3 for submission to Scottish Ministers prior to the examination of the plan. Thank you for your... Councillor Maitland.
I'm not wanting to do anything other than that you haven't quite moved on, so I'm sorry, I'd like to say something at this point. I don't think I've been in. I feel that this process, thus far, has been less than totally satisfactory to elected members, and I actually want to place that on record. There have been points at which there have been policy tweaks, in my view, which, to my knowledge, to my certain knowledge, have not been proposed by any elected member. Might have been proposed by the administration, it hasn't been clear to me that that's been the case. It's occurred at points in this process where it seemed to me that we were unable, as elected members, to influence the process. And I don't care for that. The way it's been done, I'm sure, is absolutely to the letter of the legislation, but I just wanted to put on record that I don't like it. In the past, we had the opportunity to specifically make recommendations and change things on an annual basis. The system has changed. I'm not blaming an officer for this, I'm simply saying that that's the case. If we made representations, we debarred ourselves, it seemed to us, from taking part in the chamber, and we couldn't make any particular changes because they had to be hung on representations from the public. So I just want to say that somehow this has not been what we wanted to see happen. The independent group has got particular views with respect to the sudden introduction into this plan of the retirement policy for agriculture. We disapprove of it. There was no way that we could possibly have objected to it under these circumstances, under these arrangements. So with that remark, thank you. You've indulged me and you can cut me off at the knees, but I certainly want to make my opinions clear.
Councillor Crothers.
I think there has been some... we could have used a more streamlined process and there could be more access via members, but I think it's taking on board the comments and the representations part, what was just picked up on at the last committee, that was an improvement. I think other than that, the only thing that should have really been done was put to Planning, House and Environment Service Committee. At that point, then local members at any level throughout the council could have put forward their position at that point without making a representation. Then it would have come back to full council for final adoption at that point. I think that would have been a simple solution to the whole problem.
Right. Are members content to go through the rest of the agenda? Or do you want to break for lunch? No. Right. Item 4. Standing Order 18, Policy and Resources Committee, 3rd September 2013, the adoption of a major festivals and events strategy for Dumfries and Galloway. Under the terms of the Standing Order, we need to address whether the requisition fulfils the requirements of the Standing Order. Councillor Smith, would you like to address that point?
I would certainly believe that it does meet the requirements. I think the document that's been submitted is quite self-explanatory, that an event has been included within a major event strategy that does not meet the criteria that was agreed for the major event strategy. Now, there are two ways forward. You either amend the criteria or you amend the list of organisations that are involved, but you can't basically have it two ways. Now, the reason why I think the requisition actually meets the criteria is because the raw information obviously wouldn't be available to all the members at the time the decision is made, and that's mainly the fact that in terms of Youth Beats event, it doesn't meet the criteria which states that the event, to be a major event, has to be marketed to a target out of the region audience, because we know from information since that meeting that Youth Beats is not targeted to an out of region audience. In fact, it's very deliberately targeted to a local audience, and that was a decision of members. So the event itself doesn't meet the criteria. So we either need to look at amending that criteria or amending the list of events. But either way, I think it does very much meet the requirements of a requisition. And my fear is that the Council will open itself to action from any organisation that believes that it should be part of the major event strategy, but is then told by the Council that you're not part of the major event strategy because you don't meet the criteria, when as a Council we are deciding to include an event that actually also doesn't meet the criteria.
Members happy to open up this, or feel that that has explained why this has met the required policies, standing orders? Yep. I would move that we withdraw delegation from Policy and Resources. And Councillor Smith, do you want to put your amendment, or if you want to speak to your report?
Certainly, again, I'm going to hold members back. The recommendations are set out in 2.4 from the Labour Group. We're concerned that this particular event, first of all, there's insufficient information available to members of Policy and Resources Committee as to how this event came about. It was something developed partly by Nestdale Area Committee, but more importantly by young people within Nestdale itself. This is young people that have developed this event into not just a concert that some people seem to think it is, but actually a major educational event, an award-winning educational event, and actually in recent years now a youth festival which covers several events. It's been built up over a period of time. It's a real success story for this council, and we seem to be seeking to tinker it for no apparent reason at all. I know there's a major desire to see a major event strategy, and the Labour Group are very supportive of that. I know there's a major desire to see regional events effectively not basically being landed on area committees, which has happened in the past. And again, the Labour Group were supportive of that. But our fear is that this particular event is being treated differently from the other events on the list. Comments were made at the Policy and Resources Committee by officers that instead of the event effectively being developed by this area committee, which has happened in the past, what would simply happen is that the event would be reported to this area committee along with the usual performance framework. So in other words, it would be removed from this area committee, transferred to Policy and Resources Committee, and the role of this area committee would simply be about getting a report now and again on what's happened to that particular event. And I think that actually goes against the way this event was developed, and as I say, in particular, the involvement of young people. There's been no consultation whatsoever with those young people when it comes to developing a major event strategy, and presume there's been absolutely no consultation whatsoever with the staff behind Youth Beats as well when it comes to developing that particular event strategy. So our concern is that we need to look again at the actual specific criteria for the event strategy and take a sort of more robust look at that than what we merely did was take a consultant's report at the last meeting, effectively rubber stamp it, and not actually tie up what they were saying in that report with the list of events within that. So the recommendations are set out in 2.4. It very much does not go against the major event strategy, but it simply asks that we look at that in a bit more detail in the future before we finalise that particular list.
Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I was at the last Policy and Resources Committee when we discussed this, and I think Councillor Smith will remember that I did speak about Youth Beats, and the feeling at the time was that it had become a bit of a regional event. It was asking for funding from 4 area committees. I think, to be fair, I kind of misunderstood what becoming a regional event meant, and in that it would need to be more widely advertised now. And I have complete sympathy with Councillor Smith in the sense that Youth Beats has been set up by Nestdale for the young people across Dumfries and Galloway, but I think I misunderstood exactly what a regional event would become and how it would be funded, and I do have some sympathy and think that it does need to be more sort of locally maintained Where the funding comes from obviously would be subject to future report and needs to stay an event for the young people in Dumfries and Galloway. Certainly when we did actually see some come across from other areas, England and such like, we actually had some trouble, and that's not fair on our young people. So I do have some sympathy. I also think at 2.31, a breakdown of costings wouldn't do us any harm to see. I think from a scrutiny perspective, it would be good to look at what all the 4 areas do in relation to the civic pride funding.
Councillor Cash and then Councillor Maitland.
Just a comment on, I'd first of all like to congratulate the committee and the young people involved in the Youth Beats event. I was lucky enough to be able to attend, and it was a fantastic day, and I'd also like to comment on how well it was hosted at the new venue, if that may be temporary or whatever. And also, I don't think there's any desire from the policy, the last committee, to take any sort of control away from the Nithsdale committee or the young people that actually organise it. I think the overriding thought was that this has become an event that's more than just Dumfries, and that it wasn't necessarily the case that the Nithsdale should fund it completely, and it was more a recognition that this was an event of regional importance with children from right across the region benefit from it. So I don't think there's any desire whatsoever to remove the involvement of the young people of Dumfries itself.
Councillor Maitland.
Rather than unpicking the decision that was made, what would be the effect if we simply said, I agree, because I now understand what you're talking about with respect to the marketing out with the region, the Youth Beats event. What would be the issue about simply removing Youth Beats from that list there? Because other areas, now that they have a more clear understanding about what Youth Beats is, actually, and certainly the Stewardship Area Committee did, it supported it, albeit to a small extent, but it did support it. So what would be the impact of simply removing Youth Beats?
Mr. Haswell, I think this is in your bailiwick now.
If I remember Councillor Smith's points from the debate, I think rather than members take a decision like that just now, I'd be happy to bring a report back that would give more clarity to what being a regional event would mean, what the unique nature, because actually there could be some benefit from aspects of regional management and marketing, etc., brought to bear to support Youth Beats even further. But I think just to remove it just now would the next question I'd have to ask is, well, how much of the 300,000 was in relation to that? So I'd rather bring a report back that gives clarity along the lines that Councillor Smith was asking for earlier, which would allow members to have that information in front of them to decide the shape of it. And I could certainly bring that back at the earliest opportunity to members, which would allow the clarity of it. I think just to remove it would probably still leave those questions unanswered. So I'd rather be able to bring a report back that clarifies that, and I'm happy to engage with Councillor Smith to ensure it was the fullest report.
With that, we have the proposal from Councillor Smith at 2.4. Are members happy to agree that? As a deferred item 5, I have no further business today. Thank you for your attendance and for the work you did on the local development plan.